Hey, hello! Welcome to the upper courtyard. I asked Don to show you some of the lovely plants that we have blooming here. And it's the first week in November. And quite a few of the plants that we normally wouldn't expect to see blooming in the warmer months, they're making quite a show in the upper courtyard at this time. And before the end of the year, I'm going to be featuring some of them. But today, the one that I really think I need to feature is the Medinella. But so much to say about Medinella. Let me take a little break and ask you please to stay with us, and we'll be right back. Thanks for staying, and let's get right on to the topic at hand, the Medinella. Now, these lovely plants are considered exotic plants because, yeah, they fit the bill. Broad, lovely leaves and spectacular large blooms that last for quite a while. We have grown 3 different Medinella varieties in the garden. The large one that most persons are familiar with, the Medinella magnifica. Problem with that one though, it does get rather large. The second variety we've grown is the Medinilla cummingii, and it's a medium-sized variety, and actually it's the one I'm sitting behind. The third variety, Medinilla speciosa, is the smallest of the lot, gets to be about 3 feet tall. Medinella originated in Southeast Asia, places like the Philippines, Java, and they evolved on the forest floor, which gives you an idea of where they will do best. Now, we've placed them here in the courtyard because we've kind of created almost a jungle feel with the upper story plants and lots of other plants around that help to maintain the moisture that these lovely plants require. This plant we got as a gift from a very good friend. Hi, Eunice, thank you very much. It's doing well. We kept it in the nursery for the first year or so until it got to this size. And these blooms, it started blooming, I would think, about 3 or 4 months ago. The first 2 branches that bloomed, and much to our satisfaction, the second branch also came out with a bloom fairly soon after the first. Now, that is one of the beauties of the Medinella. It keeps blooming, and the blooms stay on for quite a while. I would think this one will give us about 4 months on these branches before they naturally go to seed and drop. So I'm going to move on now and provide information on the growing requirements of Medinellas, as well as some tips on how to care for these beautiful plants when you have them growing in pots in your garden. The Medinellas do best at relatively cooler temperatures, somewhere in the range between 65 and 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit would be ideal. Now, for sure, they do not like direct sunlight. So you have to have an area on the cooler side of your garden that has dappled light. They will actually do fairly well in shade for most of their growing period, but definitely no direct sunlight. If you did that, you're going to have burning leaves, brown leaves, dried leaves, and you're going to compromise the requirement for high humidity. So if you're in a relatively warmer location, put it in on the cooler side of your house or your garden, and make sure you do what is required to keep this direct sunlight off of the leaves and the humidity high around the plant. Another really critical tip for growing healthy Medinellas is what you put into the pot. Now, the ideal potting mix for Medinella, high organic matter, well draining. I mean, you can create a potting mix with combinations of charcoal, coconut husk, any media that's high in organic matter that drains well. What I use is a potting mix of equal parts of our light draining soil, compost, and perlite. So that gives you the nutrients, the drainage, and the water holding capacity. Now, in terms of the nutrition, What I do as a common practice is make sure that there is enough nutrients in the potting mix at the start and keep an eye on your plant. Now, a more mature plant that has already exhausted the nutrients in the potting mix, you may be required to fertilize that plant once a month or so. But what you're looking for in terms of will the plant benefit from nutrients is whether or not the leaves are starting to turn yellow and the plant is overall droopy. Now, if you're in the habit of using slow-release fertilizers, then just follow the instructions on the product label. Remember I said earlier about making sure that the plant does not dry out, that it really likes consistent soil moisture, and that means that you have to keep an eye on it, and especially if it's not raining, if it's not exposed to rainfall, at least every 3 days or so you test the soil. If the top 2 or 3 inches are dry, you water the plant. Whereas it needs consistent moisture, it does not need to be soggy all the while, so don't just pour water on it because you want to keep it moist. It has to be free draining, but the soil must not dry out for any length of time. In terms of the pest and disease that may affect Medinella, in my experience, I've had very little problems with pests and diseases. The only evidence of a pest attack are these few holes you see on the leaves, and although I didn't see what caused it, it's highly likely that it was either a slug or a snail. But the mere fact that the other leaves are intact over a year and a half period would suggest that this Medinella is really not that attractive to slugs and snails. I have seen or read that if you have it in an indoor environment, like other house plants, it may be affected by scales or thrips or mites, especially if it's a dry area, if the humidity is not optimum. And in that case, you treat the scales and the mites and the thrips in the way that you would do the other house plants. And what I do is by dipping cotton in isopropyl alcohol and just wiping the upper leaf surface, especially in the leaf axil and on the side, removing any scales or thrips that you will see. But again, if the conditions are optimum, you really wouldn't expect to have too many problems with your Medinella. The other aspect of maintaining your Medinella is maintaining them in an upright position, and for that you may have to provide supports, because these plants, these flowers are heavy, the leaves are large, so there is a tendency for the plant to bend over if it is not supported. Now, pruning, if you want to maintain a manageable shape, then pruning would be recommended, but you obviously wouldn't prune while it is in bloom. So soon after the blooms are all gone or a particular branch has bloomed off, then you will, if you want a smaller plant or to maintain your size height, then you can come and prune at the base of this flowering stalk. While I'm talking about pruning, the Medinella propagates easier from stem cuttings, and I am told that some varieties, the seeds are also fertile. We haven't tried this one, and it's something I plan to try in due course. But the easier way is propagation from stem cuttings, and that too I plan to try and bring you the results of the propagation from stem cuttings. Now, we've covered most of the areas that are important to maintaining your Medinella in a healthy condition. However, I have to admit that we were a bit tardy in maintaining some of our earlier Medinellas, and I'm always happiest when I can demonstrate something, however small that demonstration is. So I'm going to bring one of the earlier plants that are in terrible condition and show you what I would do to resuscitate it and bring you an update on that later on. This plant is a real survivor. It has been essentially fending for itself over the last 3 or 4 years. We placed it on the ledge, as I mentioned, and you can see it here. But the other plants that were around it, we have a rambling rose as well as a roselia, and those just really kept going and going. We trimmed them, yes, but after a while they really offered a lot of competition to this plant. Tribute to it, it survived, but we have to help it along. At this stage, I am going to see whether or not we can give it a little R&R. We're not repotting. It is really not fully pot bound as yet. And I don't want to disturb it so much and then create more problems. So I'm going to give it a little resus now and hoping that in a few months' time it will show evidence of regrowth, and then we can determine what to do with it then. The first order of the day is to support this plant. So I put in another upright, another stake. This stake worked for a while, but I think by now it too needs some support. I'm using cable ties because it removes the need for me to make a knot. And I can adjust good, excellent. We've attached the plant in 3 locations to the stake, and that should keep it fairly sturdy, even in a windstorm, we hope. So the next step is to prune the dried branches and any other branch that we want so that it gets a nice rounded shape. And as usual, before you cut into any plant, you sanitize your tool, and I'm using our mixture of hydrogen peroxide and water. Now, I'm cutting the dry branches, but as close as possible to the node. I'm not just cutting it in the middle there. 1, aesthetics, and 2, cutting close to the node will encourage growth of new shoots near to a node. And the next step in the pruning would be to see whether or not by judiciously removing portions of a live branch, we can encourage the tree to send out shoots where we want it. Looking at pruning for shape, I think I'm going to err on the side of caution since this plant is in recovery mode, but a few branches are really sticking out too far from the main concentration of branches. So I'm just going to take this one, cut it here, and keep an eye on whether or not it sends out new shoots right here. And anything else that's in the way? This one, if I cut here, it will push this one to grow and provide more foliage in the center core. And here's the last one I'm going to take off. This isn't going anywhere fast. So there we are. This is minimal pruning at this time, especially since the plant is under stress. Now, let's get to where it really matters, the soil. Now, what I'm going to do is to remove the top 3 or so inches of the old mix and replace that with new mix. This mixture has equal parts compost, perlite, and soil. And what I'm going to do is give it a first drink of fertilizer. I'm using 20-20-20 soluble at the rate of 2 tablespoons per gallon. I'll observe the plant, and in about a month or 6 weeks, depending on what I see, I will make a follow-up application. So now that I've finished the resuscitation activities, the last step is to put this plant in a more favorable location. And you guessed it, I'm just going to keep it in this courtyard where I can keep a regular eye on it and also compare it with the other one as it grows. So now that we have placed our sick plant in the appropriate location for optimum treatment, and our beautiful showpiece is back to the center stage, that brings me to the end of this video. I had fun presenting you with some of our mistakes, and hope that you've learned from them, and as well as the tips for you to keep your Medinellas looking wonderful in your garden. Now, if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed already, we are encouraging you to do so. Thanks for watching, take care, and until the next video, bye-bye.